What's happening, everybody? So, a few days ago now, there's a Switch 2 edition announced for Xenoblade Chronicles. Actually, the full title is Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition Nintendo Switch 2 Edition. I'm starting to miss the era where everything was just new. At least that was easier to remember. Now, I'm not really big on the Xenoblade Chronicles series, it's just not something that I've played. Not against it, I don't think it's bad or anything, I just haven't played it. But based off of my understanding, originally Xenoblade Chronicles X was a Wii U title released in 2015. Last year, I believe it was in March, it was ported over to the Nintendo Switch as Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, which included some minor gameplay adjustments, some new content and characters and graphical enhancements, and it was met with positive reviews from journalists. Or so that's what this Wikipedia page says. So if I'm not mistaken, it was basically the last Wii U game that was ported over from the Wii U to the Switch. Now, presumably, you would think that this game would have been perfect to be a day one Switch 2 game, or at least something that would get a Switch 2 edition early on while they were launching the console. Like the game was brand new for the Switch 1, anybody that bought a Switch 2 early on that also happened to be a Xenoblade Chronicles X fan could have just played a Switch 2 edition, but for one reason or another Nintendo decided to wait until the following year and shadow drop it a few days ago. I think I mentioned it in one of my previous videos, but the only reason I hadn't made a video about this game yet was because we were too busy with Pokemon and then I wanted to talk about the Circana stuff before I moved on to this. But that being said, I do remember a few discussions about people saying they were probably waiting so that they can make a good Switch 2 edition for this title, and that's likely part of the reason why they weren't just giving it a free update so it can run well on the Switch 2 with the console's launch. Right, because this is a Nintendo published title, so this would be considered first party. And it was released like 3 months before the launch of the Switch 2. Now, instead what happened, as far as this Switch 2 edition is concerned, it gets the exact same content that you would see in all of the Nintendo free updates. The ones like Mario Odyssey and Mario 3D World that just got the frame rate and resolution bump. I don't know why I'm saying all of the free updates as if there's a lot of them. It's a small handful of games, and it seems like that list is not going to be growing dramatically larger as the time goes on. In a similar way that I don't expect that more games will be included as part of NSO's free upgrades like the Zelda ones were. But I digress. So Xenoblade Chronicles X gets a Switch 2 edition, so it effectively becomes a port of a port. But there is nothing added with this Switch 2 edition. It's just there. Like there's no Xenoblade Chronicles X Definitive Edition, Switch 2 edition, cross, I don't know, Jamboree TV. Basically what I'm trying to say is that there's no additional content. It's literally just the performance and resolution bump. So it seems like I've gone through this dozens of times at this point, but it's already extremely bad faith that Nintendo still requires people to pay an additional fee to upgrade their games when they already decided to upgrade their console. So you decided to spend $450 to $500 to get a Nintendo Switch 2, your Switch 1 games should just be running better on the Switch 2. I think one of the largest scams of the Nintendo Switch 2 is that they have gotten away with charging people to play games at a better resolution. And actually, an even bigger scam than that is the fact that most of the Switch 1 games are still not getting resolution bumps, including first-party titles, or frame rate bumps for that matter. But I've already delved really deep into this as it is. Now, that being said, you can also tell how much effort Nintendo put into something based off of the price that they're charging it at. There are obviously exceptions to that with stuff like Pokemon and Mario, since they know they're going to get people to pay for that regardless. But if they are asking for a $5 payment to go from the Switch 1 to the Switch 2 version, or, to put it in a simpler term, if they're asking for $65 for a Switch 2 games when the Switch 1 game is $60, it's a very clear indication that they put almost no time and effort into bringing over that Switch 2 edition version. And it's realistically should be something that was free. And the funny thing is, you can tell how little effort they put into this, because waves of people online have been complaining about the Switch 2 edition. All over social media, people have been saying the game's supposed improved visuals actually looked worse than how they were playing them on the original Switch. And as a matter of fact, it's gotten so bad that Nintendo is now issuing refunds for people that bought the Switch 2 upgrade, or if they just outright bought the Switch 2 edition game. And if you know anything about Nintendo, they are extremely stingy when it comes to refunds. So they've effectively been caught. They are fully aware that they basically just tried to completely half-bake this frame rate and resolution bump, and they had the audacity to sell it to people as a Switch 2 edition rather than just give them a simple update, without seemingly putting in so much as a minute of quality control. And what's wild is because this is a Wii U game, there are people that are playing the Wii U version with an emulator obviously in native 4K So there's actually something to compare the game to. So when you put the Switch 2 edition and you compare it to the Wii U emulated version, which is simply just running 4K 60 frames per second, which is effectively what they promised with this brand new console and how it would run your Switch 1 games. But unsurprisingly, Nintendo is not even to deliver something as simple as that. They are running games from 2 generations ago on their modern console that just came out this year, and they are failing to meet the standards from a visual and performance angle. Now, historically speaking, and I am sure some people will argue this point against what I'm saying, in the case of Nintendo consoles, we're kind of conditioned to ignore performance and ignore resolutions. And that the important thing is the gameplay and the fun that's had while you're enjoying it. You don't need like the latest high-end tech. And yes, historically, that would be correct. But that was before Nintendo decided to charge big boy prices. And the justification of their big boy prices was the expectation that they were now part of the modern gen. But I wonder how it's possible to consider yourself part of the modern gen if your own first-party game from 2 generations ago can't simply run at the frame rates or the resolutions that you used as an advertisement for your console from like the day of its reveal, and that was the justification for the absurdly high price point for the inferior hardware that you were selling. But then after that, they have the audacity to suggest that people pay $5 to upgrade that game that they bought for the Switch 1 when they clearly put little to no effort into anything for that Switch 2 port. This is effectively proof that when Nintendo sells something for cheaper than people would expect it to go for, that means you should expect the lowest quality effort that they put in order to get to that lowest price point. So for example, Mario Galaxy 1 and 2 as a combo pack, $70. Everybody's like, oh, this is really good. $35 for each game if you buy it together, and $40 if you buy it separately. The argument is how great the games are, and the discussion around $70 being a standard price, so $40 is an excellent price for these amazing games that were on the Wii. But then you peel it back a bit and you realize that Nintendo put like an afternoon's worth of effort into getting these games on the Nintendo Switch 2, and that's why they were supposedly so generous in selling it for $40 each. And then now, Pokemon Fire Red and Leaf Green. There are people out there that have the view that it is only $20, and a $20 game of the caliber of Fire Red and Leaf Green in 2026 is so worth it. The fact that Nintendo would allow people to enjoy these amazingly 20-year-old games for a fraction of the price of brand new games now should be something that's celebrated, they say. But then you think about it for a few seconds and you realize that Nintendo, the only reason they would sell a game for $20 is because they put almost no effort into that title. Now in the case of Fire Red and Leaf Green, that price is obviously bumped up a little bit more just because it's Pokemon, which makes it even more egregious. But then you consider another title like Drag X Drive, which is also $20 on the Nintendo Switch 2, and you look at how bland and uninspiring and dull that entire game is, especially when you compare it to something as colorful and full of character as ARMS was, and it's like, oh, that's why they're only charging $20 for these games, because they phoned it in and put zero effort into bringing those games out to you. You see it with the pricing of their DLCs, you see it with the pricing of their upgrade packs, and more often than not, the people that defend these price points and celebrate the lower price points are not the ones that are fully understanding the message that's being sent by Nintendo. When a Switch 2 edition upgrade is $5, people will come at me and say that I am not celebrating Nintendo only charging $5, because for them they think it's just about the price. Right, this is kind of going to be a little bit of a tangent here. For example, even when you talk about the hardware that's being sold for the Switch 2 or the games that are being sold, you often see them make the same reactions where they're like, oh, they won't spend $450 on a Switch 2, but they'll go and buy a PC for $1,000, or they'll go and buy a PlayStation for $500. Or, they'll tell me like, why did you buy a Legion Go for $400? Like, if the Switch 2 is so expensive. It's because it's not just the number that's next to the price point. I'm okay with spending $5,000 on something if I'm getting $5,000 of value out of it. And when I say value, I don't mean subjectivity because it makes my heart warm. Like, that'll play a part of it, but it's not entirely all of it. I want to see tangible value in what I'm spending my money on that's worth it for the price that I've spent. Right? Like, if I'm buying a car, for example, I will spend X amount of money more if it means better gas mileage and features that are worth spending that money on. Nintendo's Switch 2 tablet locks you into their interface, which forces you to play the games that they want you to play at the prices they want you to pay, and offers very little flexibility on how you can enjoy any of those games, including their main system seller in Mario Kart World, without allowing you to play intermission tracks. And they don't allow you to adjust the game settings in order to enjoy them, even if the hardware is capable of them. Why is it that if you're somebody that owns a Nintendo Switch 2, you cannot play Super Smash Bros. At a more stable frame rate and an improved resolution? But guess what? If you're on a PC or you're on a Steam Deck or any other one of those handheld gaming devices, not only do you have options to buy more games that are not Nintendo published, but if you happen to play your games on a weaker device and then you move over to a stronger device, those games get to run better without doing anything special. Heck, sometimes even amongst the same devices, you can change the settings so that it outputs more power. I modded my Switch 1, something that Nintendo does not allow you to do. The biggest thing that I did on my Switch 1 was overclock it so that these games could run better. They run more smoothly. For a long time, I was wondering why so many people were complaining about Tears of the Kingdom, and then I realized, I was like, oh yeah, I played this thing on an overclocked Switch. It wasn't as bad as people that played it on a regular Switch. These are features that I would like to have control over if I'm paying $400 plus. And of course, Nintendo is not the only one that lacks the customization. All the consoles will limit you to an extent. But at least when I see the performance output from a PlayStation 5 or from an Xbox Series X, and then I put it side by side with the Nintendo Switch 2, I'm like, yeah, that looks more powerful, it makes sense, that costs more money. And then the counter argument is the portability. And then I'm like, okay, why does your screen suck? Why does your battery suck? Why do all the benefits of it being portable not apply here? But again, if the portability is the most important thing, there are alternatives, and that's why I have a Legion Go. Like, it's not about the prices. Just because Nintendo is only selling something for 20 bucks or only offering an upgrade pack for $5, I don't celebrate because of those price points. A $500 Nintendo console would have been worth it if they gave you a reason to make it worth it. But they haven't, and the proof of that is the fact that everywhere outside of Japan where the price is at that full price, they've seen underwhelming sales numbers since the console's launch. So it's not that I want Nintendo to suddenly just offer things for $5 as an upgrade. I want the effort that they're putting into the stuff that they're selling for 20 bucks, I want that to be $5. Because you know that with Nintendo's overpricing of everything, if they're selling it for only 20 bucks, even if it is an upgrade pack, that means every other publisher in the world would be selling it for $5, maybe 10. And likewise for these $5 upgrade packs, everybody else would not be able to get away with charging $5 for what Nintendo is charging $5 there. And even if they were getting away with it elsewhere, even if Sony fans or Xbox fans expect when PlayStation and Xbox do something in their own little interface, that does not mean that Nintendo fans have to shut up and just accept things. And that applies to digital games, that applies to game keycards, that applies to upgrade packs. Nintendo and Nintendo's fandom is its own island. It's its own bubble. I and everyone else have every right to complain about Nintendo when they do something that pertains to the Nintendo gaming community. It does not matter if others did it and got away with it. Otherwise, what's the point of even having a favorite console or favorite games or favorite publishers? If Nintendo wants to do things that Sony has done, why would I be giving them money when I don't give Sony money because of the way that Sony does things? And look, the PS5 right now is doing very well, and I'm sure a large part of it is because they've catered to their fandom as much as they've needed to cater to them. Sony has shown generation after generation that they have enough of a following worldwide where they can get away with whatever they want to do and still succeed. Even when they flop, they succeed. Like with the PS3, for example. But whether you see it now or we wait till later to find out, there is going to be an extent of the success of the PS5 that has to do entirely with Xbox completely crapping the bed. And it's because a lot of those Xbox fans started to realize that, like, the benefits of having an Xbox, maybe they're not quite there anymore if Game Pass, for example, is overpriced. So they could very easily decide to sell their console and decide to get a PS5. Or for example, in this past holiday season, since the Xbox is not on a discount, similarly priced to the PS5 like it's been every other Black Friday, even new hardware buyers looked onto the store shelves and realized, hey, the PS5 is there for $400, we might as well grab that as a gift for our kids. It doesn't happen overnight, it'll be gradual, but it is a piece of the equation. And again, I'm not saying that this is the only reason the PS5 will succeed, but it is part of it. And while it's happening to a lesser extent, there will absolutely be Nintendo fans that saw the Nintendo Switch 2 as the same price as the PS5, and since the Nintendo console is not the budget option, which it historically has always been, they might shrug and just figure they're gonna get a PlayStation 5. This obviously will not happen to the hardcore fandom, it'll happen to the larger blue ocean people. Some of them will decide to get a PS5 instead. Others will decide to just stick with their last gen console. Others will decide to grab a PC. Others will just quit gaming altogether or play something free to play on tablets and give those as gifts. Because the issue right now with Nintendo, and it's the pricing structure of their software, their upgrades, their console, everything, is the value proposition of what it offers. I've already made myself very clear. I think this all ultimately started with the console's price. People want to say that it's not the console, it's the price of the games, and quite frankly, through the entirety of the Switch 1's life, I saw so many people complaining about the price of the games, the lack of discounts, how expensive the Joy-Cons are, how expensive the Pro Controller is. I saw all of those complaints through the Switch 1's life, and then I saw the Switch 1 sell more than 150 million units. That price of entry matters. Maybe not so much to the enthusiasts as much as the blue ocean, but it does matter even to some of the enthusiasts, and that's why my channel still gets views. But the price of entry absolutely matters, because when people used to go to the store and think, what do I want to buy for my kids, or what should I buy because I want to pick something up to play really quickly, they would see something cheap in Nintendo and be like, yeah, that's trustworthy, I get it. They didn't take out their calculator and look at the price of the games and the accessories and the controllers. They're just like, what, $300 for a whole game console and the competition is $400 or $500? Yeah, I'm good. Give me the $300 one. That subset of the fandom is not going to the store and thinking to themselves, I want to buy a more expensive PC because in the long run, the games are going to be cheaper and I can have more flexibility, because the price of entry is often very important. It's the same reason subscriptions are doing as well as they are. It's the same reason why people lease their cars instead of buying. It's the same reason why people will rent an apartment instead of buying a house. All of these issues with the Nintendo Switch 2 started first and foremost with the price of the console, and I stand by that. And I think it's a very big reason why so many Nintendo fans are confused as to why people are complaining about all of these prices. Because in every other generation, it was very easy to be like, well, yeah, Sony's doing it, Xbox is doing it. But back then, people were ignoring it because whatever, they dropped $300 on a Switch or $200 on a Switch Lite. Nintendo decided to act like one of the big boys. Now there's competition. Now there are options. There's alternatives. There are Nintendo fans that now decided to buy a PlayStation 5. There are Nintendo fans that decided to buy a Steam Deck or another handheld gaming PC. There are Nintendo fans that decided to use that budget in order to build a PC. And yes, there are Nintendo fans that decided to go backwards and buy a Wii U or a 3DS or anything. Anything but the Switch 2, which they now view as an overpriced piece of hardware. All of Nintendo's already expensive software would have been completely ignored again for a whole other generation if Nintendo didn't try to come out and convince people to spend more money for the entry. But since they have, they've put a lens on them, and the lens on them is not forgiving. $5 upgrade for something that should be free for Xenoblade Chronicles, and they've been absolutely exposed in how little effort they've put into it, and now they are issuing refunds because people have realized that $5 effectively means Nintendo put zero effort into something, including quality control. And this whole discussion is for a game that originally came out in 2015 on a Wii U that was considered weak in 2015, and they're struggling to run it now properly on their brand new next-gen Nintendo Switch 2. Yeah, go get your refunds, people. This thing is already outdated.